Introduction to computers. This is Thursday. And we covered security at the end, but we reviewed networking. We have the next assessment is Tuesday. It'll be the last hour of the class period. We'll work on database work, first part of the class period. And we did some database work at the end of today. We talked about protocols, bandwidth, media. We spent a lot of time on all those things. Rules for transmission of data through a network, bandwidth, how much data we can move at any one piece of time, and then media, wired, wireless, and fiber optic, what we send it across. We talked about those major devices, switch routers, modems that predominate in networks. We talked about that, and firewalls. We reviewed a little bit. We went into the addressing. You got that physical address that's with every single device, that MAC address, sometimes referred to media access control. And then you have your logical IP address, which your device gets depending on what network it's connected to. So it'd be different if you logged into the wireless here at college or you logged into wireless at a coffee shop. It connects you to a particular location. And if you're using the internet, then that has to do with the ISP that you're connecting with. Internally, in networks, we have private IP addresses. And then if you need to go out to the internet, they're translated using network address translation to a public address for out on the internet. That public address typically comes then from your ISP. So you should understand that concept there too. We reviewed briefly LAN and WANs, and we talked about logical networking topologies. I draw them on the board all the time, what the network looks like, we get the cloud, and then you should understand the physical network, the actual cabling, connecting to patch panels, wiring closets, and then physically there's cable or there's an access point that you connect to through the air. We didn't spend much time reviewing the internet. Most people have a pretty good grasp on the internet and how it works. We did talk about World Wide Web, HTTPS secured, HTTP. We actually looked at the NIACC and noticed that that's secured now, that access to all that information for students. We reviewed file transfer protocol, a secured transfer that's encrypted, or just plain FTP, which is not secured. And we reviewed download, you're bringing a file to your current device. Upload, you're sending a file from your device up to another device, a server or something. We reviewed briefly websites, the importance of those, and we talked a little bit about cloud computing. Putting items into the cloud, which in reality goes to cloud as a network, and you put it somewheres, and then you get the information back away from there. So you have access to it everywhere. Virtual private network, we talked about some examples there where you can use the internet to connect to sites. Like this could be your headquarters and this could be your remote site, and they can connect in through the internet. And really the only cost is the connection to those ISPs. And you can secure the data going through the network, the internet. Voice over IP, using an IP network for voice, like for phone calls and transmitting voice rather than using a regular phone company. We reviewed an intranet. It's like an internet but within a company. Typically you don't give people from the outside access unless you have a certain group of people that you want to give access to, and then it's called an extranet. All right, so that is a review of the networking part. That's a review of the networking part. Then we went into the security and we reviewed that. Integrity of the data. We talked about security. What we're trying to secure is data. Integrity, the quality of the data. Is it accurate? If accurate would be a great word to put with it. Can you trust the data? Confidentiality. Who can see what data? Okay, and what can they do with the data? And then we got to make the data available. How can we make the right data available to the right people and make sure the data is accurate? Okay? So, where do we have to worry about those three things? Well, we have to worry about it where the data is stored or when we're moving the data, like through the internet or just even from one computer to another, and while the data is actually being processed in memory. How do we protect it? Well, we have products and devices. Products and devices, and we talked a little bit about firewalls, virus software, and so forth. So we have products and devices. We need to make sure we school people that they follow the policies. Okay, so people are a huge part of protecting the data. Who we give rights to what data and how well do we prepare them, like prepare them for procedures, like changing passwords, or where should they store data, or how should they access data, procedures in terms of what data is kept on their personal devices and what not, and so forth. How do they actually manage that? And then the policies and guidelines, the policies indicate how we're going to manage all that. You know, what's our policy on security? How long do you keep emails? And if you're not going to keep emails, if your company policy is only keep emails for 2 weeks, then you have to teach somebody a procedure to remove the emails so they know how to do it. Guidelines are like policies, except typically there's not as many repercussions. It might be, these are the things we ought to do and follow, without maybe specific repercussions. Policies, you could do something as simple as send an inappropriate email and possibly cost you a job. That would be the extreme. The whole thing becomes a balancing issue. How much security do you need, but yet you don't want to stop people or the business from being productive. You don't want to lock everything down so tight that you can't be productive, but yet there are certain things that you must secure. So it's kind of a balancing act. How do we manage access? Well, we talked about, we authenticate people, identify who they are. There's 3 basic things. You can identify somebody by what they know a password or an ID, by who they are, something they are, like their finger, their face print, the iris of their eye, you can measure that, or something they have. They could have a token that they slide, or they could have a name badge that they wave over a door, over a marker that indicates they can get in, or even something as simple as a debit card would be an example of something you have, and your PIN number would be something you know. Once you authenticate people, you authorize them in terms of what they can do or what they can't do on the network, or what data they can access or data they can't access. So when you authorize, you're saying, you know, the confidentiality part of who can do what where and who can change data to make sure it's accurate. And then the third of those, auditing and accounting, keeping track of what they did. Authenticate who they are, then they're authorized what they can do, and then we monitor what they did, keep track. Data that needs to be secured, we can use cryptography. We can use encryption. The data could be encrypted based on some key so that the data then is decrypted at the other end, or decrypted when you need to use it. Hashing is a way to manage passwords or to check the integrity of data. You can hash some data, then when the data is transferred somewhere else, you can hash it again and match the hashes up, make sure they match. Passwords are typically done by hashing. They're hashed. You can't undo a hash, so the only way you could steal somebody's password that's been hashed is to try all the combinations that might work for that. Of course, there's software that allows you to try all those combinations. Almost done. Hardening of equipment, making sure equipment is in a secured location. And you can do things like disabling the flash drive and the CD-ROM so people can't put other things into the equipment, and also managing what ports are available on equipment and so forth. Incident handling, when something goes wrong, you got to figure out how you're going to handle that. If it has financial issues, probably you need your lawyer involved and so forth in a company. And companies need to maintain a very good policy on all of their security issues. And there are lots of ways to manage those policies. All right. So here's an overall view of the security part. So the exam on those 2 things, Chapter 5 and 6, with the notes available, you can use your notes or the outline, is next week.